rich people, always flying off somewhere.
Hey everyone, this is Maureen. I am recording the Vegan Vanguard podcast alone this week. Mexi is not here, and though I will miss her dearly, I think that you'll really enjoy this interview with Rama. So Rama gave a talk at the Vegans of Color conference in VegFest Dublin, which I also gave a talk at, the VegFest Dublin part, not the Vegans of Color conference part of it, obviously. But anyway, this entire conference was so wonderful. I'm going to include a link to the streaming of the entire conference down below. But anyway, this conference is where I first heard about Rama's work. Her talk was called The Vegan Washing of Hinduism, and I thought that the information was so fascinating and very underreported in the vegan community, so I asked her to join me on the show, which she has kindly agreed to do. So yes, that will be today's episode. So Rama gave the presentation in Dublin with slides, which she's uploaded to a link that you can find in the description box of this episode. If you're listening to this in the car or on a walk or for a multitude of other reasons you don't have access to a computer, don't worry, because all of the information will still make sense to you if you just listen to the audio. However, if you can look at the slides, I do recommend it. There are some instructive maps and images and even tweets that Rama has included in there. In this presentation, Rama is going to tackle a lot, and I'll let her introduce the presentation in greater depth in a moment. But amongst other things, she is going to demystify the myth that Indian culture and even Hinduism advocates for vegetarianism. She's going to explain why that myth has long been propagated by both Westerners and Indians, particularly those of upper castes, or those belonging to upper castes. Most vegans will also probably know about India's beef ban, which was passed in 2015, since it was very widely celebrated in the vegan community. However, Rama is going to explain to us why it's very dangerous and counterproductive for vegans to associate themselves with the ban and push such a positive image of the ban. She also is going to talk about the use of the word Ahimsa in the vegan community and explain why it's problematic in even way more ways than I was aware of. So before we get into the video, here is a short bio of Rama herself. Rama lived in Chennai, India until the age of 10 when she emigrated to the UK with her family. She then moved to the US in her 20s with her spouse, and she has lived there ever since. She has 2 grown children and a dog and 2 cat companions at home. She graduated from the University of Oxford and then got a PhD from the University of Wales, both in an area of psychology that involved a decade or so of animal experimentation. She also got a business degree later on and spent another decade working in and teaching in the area of marketing. Rama became a vegan about 6 years ago after reading Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, which was set as college reading for her son. Then she began to work to promote veganism, and she worked as an educator where she presented to thousands of students on the topic of compassionate eating choices. She runs Vegan Michiana, a local organization that promotes veganism in the South Bend, Indiana region. You can also find many of her articles at medium.com. Anyway, all of that will be in the show notes. So one very last thing before we get into the episode, I wanted to shout out our patrons, which I'm weirdly excited to do because Mexi is the only one who has ever done this up until this point. So, introducing this week's particularly amazing patrons, we would both like to give a warm thank you to Zebr, Zebr. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce any of these correctly. Leono, Maestrix Andrade Soltero, Diego Casanova, and Aaron Rosenfeld. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for your support. We really, really appreciate it. And if you would like to support the show, you can donate to us on Patreon. You can also throw us a one-time donation via our website, theveganvanguard.com. Maxie, did I do that right? I feel like this is the way that you always say it.
Almost. Hey everyone, it's Mexi, just jumping in post-editing to say that our website is actually veganvanguardpodcast.com. Veganvanguardpodcast.com. But that was so close. It was really, really close. Might as well be the same thing, except that it's not. So everyone please go to the correct website to donate to support the show. And thank you, and on with the show.
And you can, of course, share the episode on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or all of those fun social media platforms. And you can also just write us a message, and you can write us an email or a comment. We always love reading those. Oh, and of course, an iTunes review. What kind of podcaster would I be if I didn't mention the iTunes review? That tremendously helps us out and helps people find the show. So, anyway, let's get into the episode. So, Rama, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, good morning or good evening where you are. How are you, Maureen?
I'm very well. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
I'm glad to have this opportunity. Thank you. I hope these kinds of issues get further discussed and there's more knowledge about these things in the vegan community.
Me as well. I remember just having my mind blown from your talk because I always knew of like the cultural appropriation that goes on around Hinduism and the term Ahimsa in the vegan community. Like it's, I think when you know about cultural appropriation, you can tell it's a little bit like icky what's going on. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize the depth of why it was really problematic to associate veganism so closely with some of these ideas. So I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, well, thank you. You can't tell people what to. You can't, say you should do this or you shouldn't do this, but you can let people know what the situation is, and hopefully they will understand that some of these things are in fact problematic. So that's what I hope to do. Just get people to understand. Mm-hmm. So my presentation, originally we called it Veganism and Hinduism, the disconnections. And then later on, I began to think, really, we should call it the vegan washing of Hinduism, vegan washing. When I came up with it, I didn't know that was a term, but that is exactly what we're talking about, vegan washing. And the first things I'm going to say is, what are the takeaways from what I'm going to say? Mm-hmm. You probably know people call it vegans who call themselves Ahimsa. They refer to Ahimsa. They share memes on Ahimsa. In fact, if I checked on Facebook, I probably have 50 friends whose name is Ahimsa. And what is wrong with that? Well, things like Ahimsa, they're all coming out of the Orientalist vision of India. The Orientalist vision started in about the 19th century. That people in Europe began to come up with a story on what India is all about. And the story involved how India is spiritual and certain kind of spiritual superiority. It's mystical and so forth and so on. And that is actually a European story. And so it isn't really what India really is. It's actually a white people's story. And so who's, the colonialists, the British conquest also fed into this whole thing. Now, when I started to understand that, in fact, it is being appropriated, but then who is responsible for perpetuating this idea of India? Well, is in fact people like me who are people who have the resources to control the narrative of what the outside world thinks about India. There are certain people with certain privileges. There are upper caste people, as you're the privileged vegan, right? There are certain people with privileges, the upper caste people who are able to, in fact, speak with people of other countries, in fact, go to the other countries, and it's all a kind of impression management. This is what we like the fact that you think we are spiritual and we're superior for that reason, and mystical and ahimsa, perhaps. And so we don't we kind of like it. We want to keep that idea, and I'll touch a bit more on that later. So yeah, the colonialists and the Europeans were responsible for Orientalism, but also it's been perpetuated by some of the upper caste and people with resources. Okay, so in India there is a beef ban, and I know that this in several states, not all of India, and vegans in America have been really excited about the beef ban. Well, it is not what you think it is. So I really want to talk a little bit about the beef ban, and it's not something to be celebrated. It is not really a vegan success at all. So what are the implications? What do I really want you to do? Well, do not valorize or otherwise put value upon Indian vegetarianism, Hinduism, Ahimsa, or even Buddhism and Jainism, which are not Hinduism, but they're close, somewhat related. They came out of Hinduism. Don't valorize Gandhian principles. Lots of people, a lot of leaders of the vegan movement use Mahatma Gandhi as an example, and we'll talk about some of that later. And really, we should not be using Gandhi as an example. Gandhi was a casteist, so there are people in India we are going to alienate if we insist that Gandhi is the leader of the vegan movement, or one of our examples. And if you really want to represent people of Indian descent, please attempt to include lower caste and people from the Dalit, Adivasi, and Muslim communities. And I'm going to explain what those terms mean. Now, I think what is happening here in the USA is people don't want veganism to be white. Okay, they don't want animal rights to be too white. So they're looking for people of color. Okay, great. And that's what they totally should be doing. And then they look for people of color, and what is easy to find? Well, people like me are relatively easy to find. I am an upper caste Hindu, relatively privileged. In fact, Indian Americans, Indian immigrants in the USA make household income is twice as much as the white American. Twice as much. So in that sense, how are we? I mean, we're not economically marginalized, for one. So anyway, the point I want to make is, of course, you should be getting views from a variety of people, but just from getting Indian Americans, you're not really getting the voice of the marginalized people that you might be looking for. And I would say most of the Indian Americans are in fact privileged. To come here, we would need to get a visa. You need to be doing a advanced degree, graduate degree. But not everybody, and there are some others that we can in fact include in our panels. And that's what people. That's what people are looking for. If you see another panel that is only going to include upper caste Indians, that's really going to alienate some people. So moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit about brief history of India, and this is the consensus from historians in India, knowledgeable historians. This is the consensus. I mean, there's all views, but this is what we think is currently going on, what they think is currently going on. So if you've, and some of this even taught to kids in the USA, I think in middle school, the Indo-Aryan migration, which if you look it up, it's actually you'll see the map right away. This was an influx of people from the north and to the west, the steppe region, who migrated into India around about 2000 BCE. So that would be about 4,000 years ago. And these are the Indo-Aryans. Okay, so this is a migration. It's not over a period of many years, maybe hundreds of years. It is not thought to be a violent invasion. So they gradually came in, they settled. But obviously people who are in India, the indigenous, and one of the indigenous groups are Dravidians, which I will be talking about later, they were displaced. They moved to the east and to the south. But there were waves of settlement, and they were pastoralists. And so the current population of India is composed of both the indigenous and the ancient settlers, and is mixed to various extents. Other important invasions occurred over the millennia, and the significant ones would be the Mughal conquest, the Muslim conquest of the Middle Ages, and the British rule from the 18th to the middle of the 20th century. But the caste system began with the Indo-Aryan migration. Okay, it is described in the Rig Veda, which is the first Hindu scripture, they think written around 1500 or so BCE. Okay, and that describes the caste system. It has 4 varnas: the Brahmas, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. And the people below, they were not called Dalits. They were like avarnas, no varna. They were outcasts. And before I go further into describing this, I'm going to play a brief clip. This is a video that was put out recently by HuffPost, and it features Sujata Gidla, who is an author. She is a Dalit author who now lives in New York City, and she's written a book called Ants Among Elephants, An Untouchable Family and the Making of Modern India. And she does in this video clip, and Sujata herself, they do a great job breaking it down. So I'm going to play it real quick.
The first time I knew that I was inferior, I probably was 18 months old. I knew that we were untouchables. Untouchability means actually untouchability. You cannot touch them. Caste is a forced occupation based on your birth. When I first came to America, people treated me equally. In fact, even in the beginning, I used to feel, what if they touch me? They're going to be polluted. One time, a boyfriend of mine was eating from something that I already touched, and he was going there, and I said, no, stop. I touched it, and his heart broke, like, you're not in India anymore. Hinduism, more or less, is an ideological, religious prop for this social system that is caste. Brahma, the creator, the Brahmins are supposed to have come from the forehead, and the Kshatriyas from the arms, merchant caste from the thighs, service caste from legs. And untouchables are not part of any of Brahma, the creator. What makes them untouchable is they are assigned hereditary duties that are considered filthy and menial by the Indian society. Like the hardest jobs are theirs and the filthiest jobs are given to them. Based on these different occupations, there are about, in my area, 52 different subcastes within untouchability. And my family is called Mala. Mala means people who do agricultural labor. And there are others who do like removing dead animals, burning the dead people, and carrying away human My stories, my family stories, were not stories in India. They were just life. Your life is your caste is your life. At 26, I came to America, where people know only skin color. Only in talking to some friends I met here did I realize that my stories, my family stories, are not stories of shame. It's not healed. It is not healed. The advice I give to untouchables that are still in India, I think that the best thing they can do is get jobs like I have in a crucial industry like MTA. We don't work, then everything comes to a screeching halt. And it really gives a sense of like, yes, your services are crucial to the society. That gives me a lot of self-confidence that I didn't have. I'm not going to be like saying America is great, but yeah, for untouchables, yeah, it is. And for me, it's like pop music, Madonna, Bob Dylan, and it's intellectually free world. It's an escape for us. I would be judged by my nationality, but not by my caste. That gave me courage to think, what is untouchability and why am I an untouchable? I don't think there's any other solution for caste than demolishing the existing structure, because caste had a particular economic function, and that's the purpose it served, division of labor. This is not a kind of thing that I can say, oh, change your minds and stuff. You break the structures that necessitate this sort of exploitation. Unless you break the structures, this is all going to be a band-aid on a bullet wound.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. So as Ms. Gidla explained, there are these 4 castes, and the Dalits who are outcasts, and they do all these menial jobs, the really dirty jobs that nobody else wants to do, and these are hereditary. So if your father is a street cleaner, then the children are also street cleaners, and that's what happens generation after generation. You've inherited. So Dalits right now in India are for 15% of the population, so that is maybe around 200 million people. There is also another group which is not included in that diagram, but Adivasis, these are the tribal peoples, which could be another 10 to 15%. So maybe we're going, so 30%. And the line between the bottom caste, the Shudras and the Dalits is kind of blurry. So the Shudras are also marginalized in a lot of ways. So the upper caste, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and of course the representation of those different castes varies by different regions of India. But overall, they're about 30% of the population. Now, and I asked, Brahmins who are supposed to be the top, the priests and the teachers, can you guess what percentage of the population they are?
I think that I remember you saying they were like 3%.
Right.
Is that right?
So that's right. So somebody guessed 5, and that is, around 3%. Where I come from, it would Tamil Nadu, it would be more like 2.5%. That's so tiny. So when you have a panel or some other project where everybody says they're Brahmins, okay, you're not really being very representative of India. And there are some things very unique about Brahmins, which I will go to explain.
And you were saying the odds are very likely that if we know the Indians that we do know are Brahmins,
you're going to find a much larger proportion of Brahmins in the USA than you are in India.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
See what I mean? Because they are the ones with the resources to move and to come, and especially if they are, say, teachers. If education is part, if somebody's a street cleaner and that's the hereditary occupation, it's hard for them to move up. But if somebody has to go to college and learn, well, this is a knowledge economy right now, right? Mm-hmm. So you are going to find a relatively higher proportion of Brahmins and some of the other castes as well, in other upper castes as well, generally upper castes. Mm-hmm. So now, okay, I also recommend a great series of short videos. It's a documentary. It's on YouTube. It's called India Untouched by Stalin K. And it really explains how casteism works in India today. So, young children learning that they're not supposed to go into this neighborhood because it's for people of this Dalit, this is lower caste, and you're not supposed to touch them. You're not supposed to drink water. It's polluting. Okay, so these are that's happening today. So definitely recommend people to watch that. So what has all this got to do with animal rights? And well, you've seen what is speciesism? You've seen a diagram, which is a triangle with a human male on top, and a gradually larger number of animals at the bottom. And some animals we put a high value on, and some animals we almost put no value on. And it is very similar to the way caste is envisioned. Also, it's a triangle with Brahmins at the top. Mm-hmm. And then goes down to Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudras, and Dalits at the very bottom. So we all learn speciesism pretty early. It's a schema that we have in our minds. We learn speciesism, and I also learned casteism. The pain of some animals does not matter. Okay, the pain of some animals does not matter. How they live. We don't care about that. In the same way, the pain of some people, the suffering of some people doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you see people in the streets, if you see people struggling for food, if they are doing backbreaking labor, that's just the way it is. Okay, mm-hmm. Just like speciesism, we have casteism. Mm-hmm. Okay, so these are things I learned from my own upbringing. So what has all this got to do with eating and food? Well, a lot. And these are things that are so obvious, I don't really need any references. High caste Hindus do not eat meat because it is polluting. Now, we do eat dairy. Dairy is an important part of the diet, but we don't eat meat. It's polluting. Now, lower caste other castes can eat meat. They tend not to eat pigs because pigs are considered filthy and dirty. They tend not to eat cows because cows are supposed to have a privileged status, which I will talk about in a little bit. But Dalits, the Avarnas, they pretty much eat all meat, all different kinds of animals. And they say the reason that Dalits, this is one of the rationalizations, the reason that Dalits became untouchable is because their jobs include things like removing dead cattle and skinning the cattle for leather and things like that. So is India vegetarian? Let's take a look at this. Now, these are sort of census data from India to some extent, and they're not particularly the most accurate, but it's what we have. It's about it's what we have access to. Well, we know that about...
Yeah, and I was going to say, for those who want to look at the slides, which we mentioned at the beginning, there's a very clear map of what Rama is speaking about right now.
The map, so basically 70% of India is non-vegetarian. So about 30% is vegetarian. Now, it's the number of non-vegetarians is likely to be underreported. Okay, we know that's the majority. It's likely to be underreported because eating meat is kind of a stigma. Okay, so it's polluting. So if anything, is likely to be underreported. And some parts of India, where I come from, it says 98% are non-vegetarians in Tamil Nadu, which is amazing. Now, let me say a little bit more about this. If 30% of India is vegetarian, you'd think people in India would have a positive view of vegetarianism, because 30% is quite a lot. Right? Compared to European countries, compared to the US, right? You see, 1 in 3 people you see is a vegetarian. No, they do not. We think vegetarianism is not the ideal diet. Okay? We think meat to be strong, to build muscle, to be an athlete, to be hale and hearty, you need to eat meat. Okay, so the reason they're vegetarian is a kind of an ascetic sort of thing. We're doing it for purity. And in fact, some of the lower castes, like people who are military or people who do physical labor, they eat meat because they think they need to. And it also makes them impure at the same time.
But so if the higher castes, like the Brahmins, they're more vegetarian than the rest of the castes,
yes.
Right? So if it's not considered to be the ideal diet, why did they opt for that one?
Right. So they opted for it because of purity, pollution reasons.
Okay. So you're saying, like, nutritionally, I guess morally it is still regarded as higher than the other diets, but nutritionally it's considered deficient?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. Now, hopefully things are, now that we are in the age of, things like forks over knives and things like that, hopefully people, all these vegan bodybuilders, maybe that's changing. But, I'm telling you, a lot of people in India are still going to think vegetarianism is nutritionally deficient, even though we are 30% vegetarian. So, and I know you said a couple of things that I want to pick up on, but let me leave it for now. I think I'm going to pick up on them again in a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk about a little conversation that is by Christina Thomas Dhanaraj. She is a Dalit woman activist, and she's talking about a conversation, Indian corporate lunch table conversation. Person A says, I think this is herself, is there non-veg for lunch today? Person B says, don't know, I'm veg anyway. A says, oh, you veg? B says, yes, I'm Brahmin. A says, oh, I'm Dalit. I love non-veg, especially beef. B, eyes wide. Why you talk caste? I didn't ask. But A says, but you talked. You said you were a Brahmin, no? So it's the understanding that somebody being a vegetarian and Brahmin, it's so natural how it goes together. It's about purity. It's really not about caring about animals. It's certainly not about any kind of intersectional or total liberation values. It's not about empathy. It is not about compassion. It's not about any of those things. Mm-hmm. I wanted to quote some things from Kimlicka and Donaldson and Dangerous Crossings. Claire King also says similar sorts of things. Dominant groups, this is the quote, dominant groups have long justified their exercise of power over minorities or indigenous peoples by appealing to the backward or barbaric way they treat women, children, or animals. In these cases, we have racialized minorities, being told that their practices are cruel. The intention in highlighting highlighting these practices may be to improve the treatment of animals, but the effect may be to reproduce long-standing prejudices. So this is exactly, I'm totally in line with this. This is exactly what I see going on. So these are people, the Dalits and so on, they're barbarians, they're cruel, they don't know how to treat animals. So I agree with this, the latter part of what they wrote. It's just the effect is actually to reproduce long-standing prejudices. Mm-hmm. Even now in India, you will see advertisements saying for apartments or houses to be rented, they say vegetarians only. What does that mean? But I mean, and you can look now. You can Google apartments in India for vegetarians, and you will see that's how I got this image that I have on the slide. And I'm going to quote you a little part from a book by Kancha, Ilaiah, who's also an activist. The book is called "Why I'm Not a Hindu." The quote is, "Upper caste landlords or landladies put up boards which read, 'House rented only to vegetarians.' Vegetarian is a synonym for Brahmin, and this expression is used to drive away all Dalit Bahujans from their localities." So it's a kind of a code. It's coded. We don't want riffraff here. Okay. And another very interesting thing because another advertisement here, it's about how they are going to build a Brahmin-only community, and they're calling a Sattvic village. Okay, that's a very important word. What does Sattvic mean? And usually it's used in reference to food. Okay, so Sattvic food is food that is plant-based and can include dairy, but it's considered pure and clean. And in fact, it really maps well and aligns with our current understanding of clean eating.
Yeah, I was going to say there's so many parallels between the way that vegetarianism is portrayed in Brahmin, like exclusive circles, and the way that veganism is in like this purity, clean eating trend in Western countries today.
It's absolutely like that. And I wanted to bring attention to that because that word Sattvic, okay? Because that's a casteist word. That is a casteist word. Let's talk a little bit about why it is. The cow is sacred in India. I mean, why? Okay, the cow gives milk. Gives in quotation, air quotes, of course.
In heavy quotes.
Heavy. Gives milk. And they say, what about the buffalo? Because India has indigenous buffalo, right? What about the buffalo? The buffalo also gives milk. In fact, the Dravidian peoples were already buffalo herders. That's what I understand from reading the literature. When the Indo-Aryans came along, they managed to domesticate the buffalo, which Americans could never do. Okay, it's a point of pride with Dravidians that they managed to domesticate the buffalo. So again, why did the cow but not the buffalo become the Hindu spiritual animal? I'm going to quote from Kancha Ilaiah from a book called Buffalo Nationalism. The reason is simple. The buffalo is a black animal. Just as Dravidians, a black people, were never granted any spiritual status, the buffalo as a black animal was allowed none. Brahminic Hindu literature projected Brahmins as Bhudevatas, gods on earth, and cow as Gomata, the mother animal, as it was white, as well as their staple food. For generation after generation, Hindu scriptures venerated Brahmins among human beings and cows among animals. So this, I would say, is casteized speciesism. Okay.
Wow.
So the beef ban, pretty much is only applied to cows. Killing other bovines is kind of okay.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm going to bust other myths about Hinduism. What is Hinduism? Does it even really exist? And the more I start thinking about it and reading about it, and some of us who are already Hindus, I mean, we know that Hinduism can be almost anything. It's a multifaceted thing. And Hindu as a word didn't even exist till the 11th century CE, because that's when the Muslim invaders needed a name to call people of the Indus Valley, Hindus. And then later on with British colonization, they wanted a way to differentiate between the Hindus and the Muslims so that it's useful for them for Christian conversion purposes. Mm-hmm. So they kind of solidified that situation. But really, what we mean by Hinduism is like a variety of scriptures, variety of practices, it's a whole pantheon of deities. Let's just say I go to some obscure part of India, and there are villages there, and they are worshipping gods that I've never heard of, and they have certain practices and rituals that I have never seen, and they say that's Hindu. I'd say, okay, because that's what it is. Hinduism is there. And then the other thing about Hinduism is it didn't have a founder like Christianity has a founder, Islam has a founder. Hinduism didn't really have a founder. It's a lot of different things. So I would say we are putting a rigid structure on something that is very fluid and amorphous. And also current views of Indian identity it's also become followed that rigid system that's been imposed, and I will pick up on that in a little bit. Well, what about Ahimsa? Okay, this is an important topic. Well, honestly, this is a lot of what I know here comes from a book called, it's called The Myth of the Holy Cow by D.N. Jha. It is actually a banned book in India, apparently, but it's actually a pretty good book, and I encourage everybody to grab a copy. It's very well, it's got lots and lots of citations in the sense that they've read all the literature, and there's an enormous amount of literature, which we don't want to get bogged down reading. But what this author is saying is that there's always been animal sacrifices. Okay, the Rig Veda describe animal sacrifices and list a variety of animals that can be eaten. There were discussions of Ahimsa, which started early on about non-harming, but it was defined in various ways. And I'm going to read some of this. And this is a text by Manu, which was written maybe 2,000 years ago. Manu asserts that animals were created for the sake of sacrifice, that killing, vada, on ritual occasions is non-killing, avada. And injury, himsa, has enjoined by the Veda, is known to be non-injury, ahimsa. So what that's saying is sometimes killing is ahimsa, but other times it is sometimes killing is himsa, other times it's ahimsa, because you can do it for certain reasons. If you kill for certain reasons, that's ahimsa. What they're saying is an animal that is killed for sacrifice actually reaches a kind of higher level, and they come back as a more advanced being. It's actually good for the animal to be killed as sacrifice. And not just that, the sacrificer, the human being who's doing the sacrificing, also gets certain kinds of benefits because of that. So what does ahimsa really mean? It's meant all kinds of things.
Yeah, I just could not believe that when you said that during your presentation last time, just because, I mean, sure, using Ahimsa as a white vegan who has no knowledge of India or doesn't really know a lot of Indian people, like, is problematic in itself. But I didn't even know that it didn't mean strictly something vegan before your talk. Right.
Now this, I'm talking, I'm talking about what Ahimsa meant over time. Jainism, we'll talk a little bit about Jainism. Maybe this is a good time to mention Jainism. Jainism, which came about after. Now, the Jains are all about, their part of their main doctrines is ahimsa, is non-killing. Now, but again, why, and another book I would recommend is Kim Socha's book on animal liberation and atheism. Why are Jains about ahimsa? Well, it's really about, again, it's not an animal rights thing. They believe that doing harm to another being means you can't ascend spiritually. And the fact that if somebody is born as an animal, it's because of certain evil doings and, in previous life and so on. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
So why is a cow a cow? Well, in a factory farm, well, it must have been because they did something wrong in their previous life. So it's the karma. It's karma. Right.
That's interesting that they still think that those inferior beings are not worth killing then.
Right. That's right. So that is, in some ways it's good. So they do believe that other beings feel pain the way we do, which is definitely an advancement over, say, Cartesian thinking, which is animals are like machines and they don't actually feel it. But they're, I do agree with that part. And that's something, incontrovertible. So what about what about this idea of India being, or Hinduism being non-violent, spiritual? Articles about this seem to come up every few years or so. This is a recent article, Is India a Really Spiritual Civilization? It came in the Indian Express September 2nd of this year, so about a month ago, and talks about, no, that's really not true. Yes, we're spiritual, but we're materialistic as much as anybody, if not more. Again, it's a kind of idea that we have, it's a kind of an image that's been imposed on us, and we have sort of accepted and kind of ran with it, I suppose. I'm going to quote Romila Thapar, who is an eminent historian. This is from her book, The Past as Present. And she talks about this, and she says, I quote, "Religious violence is not alien to Hinduism, despite the modern myth that the Hindus are by instinct and religion a non-violent people. One suspects that the genesis of this myth was in the romantic image of the past, in some Orientalist scholarship, and in the requirements of nationalism, stressing the spiritual superiority of the Indian culture, of which nonviolence was treated as a component." So basically that quote underscores and improves upon the things that I have been saying. Okay, when I say nonviolence, now people are going to think, what about Gandhi? What about Gandhi? Well, this is another thing, and I guess it kind of blows people's minds a little bit. Gandhi has a very mixed reputation, and more Dalits, people of Dalit descent or Dalits, are beginning to speak out against Gandhi. Now, Gandhi, for all his nonviolence and leading India towards independence and so on, he was a casteist. He wanted to abolish untouchability, but he did not want to abolish casteism. He wanted Dalits to say what they are. He thought Indian society can only function and operate with the caste system set in place. He believed, like, if you are a bathroom cleaner by caste, that's how your offspring you should stay forever. That's what he believed. He believed in hereditary occupations, and he did not want to abolish casteism. So this is an article written by Tenmuri Soundarajan. She's a Dalit activist, and it's on Medium. It's called "Why It Is Time to Dump Gandhi," accessible to everybody. So please take a look at that if you can. So she talks about Gandhi being obviously anti-Black because he was a lawyer in South Africa. He is definitely casteist for the reason I just explained, and definitely misogynist and patriarchal. So please take a look at that article. But I do want to quote what Tenmuri says about this. So here I quote, "Now I know Gandhi has been a sacred cow for many activists, but not talking about the truth in order to protect personal attachments to his myth simply maintains false ideas about many core discussions that we urgently need to have between our movements. This includes conversations about nonviolence, international solidarity, anti-Blackness, and strategies to end caste oppression." So if there are some people in India who are against Gandhi because they're trying to abolish casteism, it's not a good thing for the vegan movement to adopt Gandhi as one of our leaders. Mm-hmm. And this is something that my people could really ask, and I would ask myself, why isn't casteism known about? Why don't other people in other countries know about it? How has it been kind of kept under the rug for so long?
Yes, untouchability in particular.
Right.
That blew my mind.
Right.
That just seems so extreme and concerning of so many people in India, of the Dalit class, that I can't believe that, I don't know, it's not talked about more.
It's not talked about more, and it is really strange. And I think when I started being a vegan and all this, how it's mixed up with caste and so on, it was obvious to me. And I was privileged to be a vegan because I was already a vegetarian. That's a privilege, right? Mm-hmm. And I knew about it, and I was waiting for somebody else to talk about it. I waited like 4 years. Why isn't anybody else talking about it? Okay, fine. Now I think I'm going to have to talk about it. And maybe somebody else will talk about it after me, which I think will happen. Mm-hmm. Maybe more people will talk about it now. But I also think that Dalits have not had the resources to have their voice heard. But now with social media, There's much they are really coming to their own, and I follow lots of them on Twitter and Facebook and Medium, and I've learned a lot. It's been really enlightening for me. So I'm going to quote Arundhati Roy. Right, she's an activist in India. She's an author, celebrated author, and so let's see what she says. Why is it nobody knows about this? She's asking the same question, and here I quote: other contemporary abominations like apartheid, racism, sexism, economic imperialism, and religious fundamentalism have been politically and intellectually challenged at international forums. How is it that the practice of caste in India, one of the most brutal modes of hierarchical social organization that human society has known, has managed to escape similar scrutiny and censure? She actually doesn't know. And again, I quote, she says, perhaps because it has come to be so fused with Hinduism and by extension with so much that is seen to be kind and good, mysticism, spiritualism, nonviolence, tolerance, vegetarianism, Gandhi, yoga, backpackers, the Beatles, that at least to outsiders, it seems impossible to pry it loose and try to understand it. As you can see, close quote, as you can see, she is tried to come to terms with, why is it nobody knows about it? The next quote is by Dr. Ambedkar. Ambedkar in the early 20th century is a social reformer, politician. And Ambedkar says the old Orthodox Hindu, and that would be of my grandparents' generation, and the old Orthodox Hindu does not think that there's anything wrong in the observance of untouchability. To him, it is a normal and natural thing. As such, it neither calls for expiation nor explanation. The new modern Hindu, that would be my generation, I guess, the new modern Hindu realizes the wrong, but he is ashamed to discuss it in public for fear of letting the foreigner know that the Hindu civilization can be guilty of such a vicious and infamous system or social code as evidenced by untouchability. Mm-hmm. So that resonates with me. I think that gets at the truth. Mm-hmm. I want a couple of other points I want to make, important points. What is Hindutva? Well, Hindutva is a ideology it means Hindu-ness, and it's a way to define Hindu culture and Hindu identity in terms of Hindu values. So it is remaking India in terms of Hinduism. Okay, the current political party in power, the Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP, is based on Hindutva ideology. So it's right-wing Hindu nationalism and claims Hindu supremacy. So it discriminates against Muslims and lower castes and Dalits and Adivasis. Okay, and how can they do this? Well, there's a lot of retelling of history. When Ramila Thapar talks, so when she tries to explain history to the best of her ability, as I say, they are historians. And people criticize when they write about history. They say, I'm going to again quote this passage from her book, The Past is Present. The chapter is Writing History Textbooks, a Memoir. She says, the issues that were raised by our critics were routine and predictable. Why was there a mention of beef eating? Why was it not said that the Aryans were indigenous to India? Where was the necessity to mention the disabilities of lower castes? Why did we not consistently depict Muslim rulers as oppressors and tyrants, and so on? So this is the image that the Hindutva ideology tries to project, that Aryans were indigenous to India, and because they wrote the Vedas, right? So Hinduism needs to come out of India. So they're kind of retelling history, and don't mention the fact that we ate beef because the cow is sacred. Don't mention untouchability because that makes us look bad, and you have to make the Muslim rulers look evil every time because this is what Hindutva ideology is.
So it's like a form of respectability politics, mm-hmm. right? It sounds like to cater to this like colonial vision of India as, I don't know, deserving of respect because they themselves are so peaceful and so in line with like the earth and.
Yes. Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. So one outcome of the BJP rule is the beef ban. All right. So they came up with the beef ban.
When was the beef ban passed?
2015, I think. 2015. Okay. So not all states. Okay. Some of them, a lot of them. So this is an article from 2017. It's by Ahmad Dewakar in the New Republic. It's really very good. It's called How Cow Vigilantes Launched India's Lynching Epidemic. Okay, so what's going on right now? Anybody who is suspected of eating beef or engaging in some kind of selling of beef, they're being lynched. Okay, they are being publicly flogged and killed. Actually,
that blows my mind.
And so this article lists a lot of people and who are being killed, and I won't mention any of them because we honestly don't have the time to feel sorry for all of this that's going on, which is hideous. And there's more since this is 2017 and it's only getting worse. I'm going to go on. I'm going to quote some people. This is Charan Subramanian. He's an executive committee member of Ambedkar King Study Circle. And I asked Charan, can you tell me what does the beef ban mean to you and how has it affected you? And he said, I can answer the first part, but the second, how it has affected me, not sure whether my feelings are relevant as I didn't get directly affected by the ban. I mean, I wasn't consuming beef earlier. Just after the ban and subsequent atrocities on Dalits and minorities made me rethink and reevaluate my food choices. So I started eating beef as a counter narrative. And in fact, I do consciously make an effort that my kids also do not have any sort of aversion based on some stupid preachings like I got from my grandparents and my parents about beef or any other meat. Okay, so this is a counter narrative, right? And this is what some people are doing in India. I'm going to eat beef precisely because you told me not to. This is why bans don't kind of work. People have to make the decision. And it's interesting. Charan is also being anti-speciesist. He's saying, well, I can eat a chicken, so why can't I eat a cow? Right? I can eat all of them because as vegans, we don't want you to eat any of them. But you can see his point. Here's another quote, and I think this is really good. This person did not want to be identified, but I know they are Catholic by birth, born of Catholic parents. They say, I fully believe the ban was motivated by oppressive upper caste Hindu domination and opportunistic business reasons. Heck, I even remember there being a conference organized on how to push pork as the protein of choice way before the ban even happened. I'll stick with the oppressive motives because that's what I'm reacting to. As intrinsic as beef has been to my own idea of what constitutes food, okay, they're Catholic, they're Christian, and therefore the personal anger, I can't even with having to deal with what it means to have that happen to you as a Muslim. I'm afraid you won't be able to get much more out of me because all that follows is incoherent anger, the kind you feel when someone says something both absolutely outrageous and obtuse. One other person I got a quote from, and I love this because she really puts it in a great way. Devika Karnad is a PhD student at Cardiff University, also happens to be my alma mater. She says, I asked her, what do you think about this Western vegan movement talking about Ahimsa and Hinduism and Indian vegetarianism? And she says, I think it's a really bad connection to make. It's strengthening the very toxic Hindu nationalist agenda. It's a huge issue in Indian vegan circles as well, because vegetarianism is so easily associated with the rhetoric of purity and also anti-Muslim sentiments. Anyway, the Hindu vegetarian is a huge exploiter of cows because how much dairy is consumed. So I think that there's definitely non-vegan friendly philosophical schools. And then I asked Devika, I've been trying to get some Dalits to give me what they feel, whether or not they're vegan. They're, most of them aren't. What the people I asked aren't. What do you feel about the beef ban? I asked them, I wasn't getting anything back. And she says, yeah, I would imagine it would be difficult to accommodate a vegan perspective when they're arguing for freedom of choice. But then the freedom of animals is also not being considered there, which is incredibly sad. I've seen people proudly eating beef as a protest against Hindutva politics. I do also believe that, however, that veganism or vegetarianism should not be forced upon anyone, which is what Hindutva tries to do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I liked her because she says what I'm thinking. So again, going back to what do we get out of all this? I hope I've made my point. Please do not valorize Indian vegetarianism, Hinduism, Ahimsa, or even Buddhism and Jainism. Don't valorize Gandhian principles. If you want to represent people of Indian descent, try to include people from castes, lower castes, and Dalits and Adivasi, and maybe Muslim, because Muslims are Indians too, or some Indians are Muslims. So how, and I want to talk, the next two points is about how the vegan movement, the vegan leaders have in fact appropriated Hinduism. And the first point is about Dr. Will Tuttle. And I love Dr. Tuttle. He's actually a personal friend. I've met him in person, and he's absolutely wonderful. I love his book. And books in plural, but I think that he needs to think about this and consider this. I got an email from him, which is one of his mass emails sent out last November, about 1 year ago, after his trip to India, and he says, this is the first time anyone has ever undertaken a national lecture tour in India promoting veganism, which in many ways is still a fledgling stage in India. We are deeply grateful to Shankar Narayan, founder of India's only national vegan group, the Sattvic Vegan Society.
There's
for
that
working
word.
Tirelessly. No. So yeah, and then Dr. Tuttle goes on and says one activist predicted that veganism will spread more quickly in India than any other country, and we can see that this may be so as Indian people increasingly remember their roots and are re-inspired by the ancient Indian teaching of Ahimsa, non-violence as the foundation of inner and outer peace and harmony, which is, and close quote. But I mean, it seems odd when people are, coming in and saying things like that. Okay, when a white American is coming in and saying things like that, and people are being killed over the beef ban, it just doesn't quite jibe. And then I have some other examples. Recently, Tobias Leonard, who has never really talked much about Hinduism or Ahimsa before, just recently, about a month ago, has a website. I think it's called ahimsasomething.com. And he pictured standing in front of a canvas that has the Om sign, the Hindu Om sign behind it, which is kind of interesting, kind of very slick, I would say. So there's another example. James Aspey said he went to a yoga studio and he was giving a talk on Ahimsa. Okay, I guess it's basically the same talk that he does, but maybe with Ahimsa, the word thrown in there, here and there a little bit. But even amazing the SAVE movement. I mean, even this, we love the SAVE movement, but the memorandum of understanding, the SAVE movement uses the strategy of bearing witness to animals in their final moments. We use a love-based community organizing approach based on nonviolence, love, and truth, as informed by Leo Tolstoy and Mahatma Gandhi. Of course, I think this whole Ahimsa thing, again, I could be wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I do think Gary Francione had a lot to do with it, with Ahimsa becoming so popular in veganism. I mean, the vegan movement of vegans among vegans in the U.S. He calls himself a Jain, and he went to a Jain conference trying to convince Jains to quit dairy, I suppose.
I didn't know.
Oh yeah, you could Google and you can find that on YouTube.
Yeah, I really didn't know why the word Ahimsa was so popular in the vegan movement.
I'm going to trace it back to Gary Francione, but it could go back further. But he definitely did a lot to popularize it. Mm-hmm. And of course, when the beef ban came along, Leo DiCaprio will join anti-beef Hindu group Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangha at the group's 50th anniversary celebration. Of course, people are shocked. This is Leo DiCaprio, and Veg News is commenting on the beef ban, and they're like, what? This is a fascist policy, and you're supporting it, and you're aligning the vegan movement with that? Okay, I have a last couple of points.
Wait, was this Veg News article critical of the beef ban, or are they celebrating?
No, they like it. They like it.
Okay.
Oh, everybody was celebrating the beef ban.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Probably doesn't make us look very good.
Well, it says actually, while the motivation for the beef ban is religious, DiCaprio joined the movement to connect beef consumption to probably the environment. I would say. I can't read the rest of the quote here, but yeah. Either way, there was a lot of talk in Veg News and other vegan news outlets about the beef ban as a positive thing.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. So what are people thinking about it? And I want to read some of these tweets that I come across, how it relates to the vegan movement. And please, consider this. I mean, this is a Ambedkar's caravan. They are talking about this is around the Independence Day for India, which is August 15th, and they've said, how do you define freedom? What is your definition of independence? Would you call killing on the name of cow and caste freedom? Can a country like India ever be free from caste discrimination? Now, this other person I was having a discussion with, and they're saying, well, wow, what is the beef ban doing? The beef ban is suppressing and undernourishing the population. Some people only have certain kinds of foods to eat, and if that is not available to them, it looks like the people in power are trying to kill them off without that food, and that's how they interpret it. They're trying to kill them off. Here's another one that I really want to read. This guy, who is obviously what they call a Sanghi, but he said it happens in any society. He's supporting vigilantism. He's saying it happens in any society. Nothing wrong in it. One should act according to the law of the land, otherwise there will be consequences. One should respect the sentiments of the majority community. They are free to eat any kind of meat they like. Pork, buffalo, goat, etc. Why they insist upon cow's meat? I'll tell you why. Because it's sacred to Hindus, and that's where this issue begins.
Wow.
So he's saying...
So he's not even at all making the connection between, like, not harming animals and the beef ban. It's just, like, a law to basically further oppress people who can't make that choice.
Yeah, and remember earlier on that one of the people I got quotes from, they were saying they were discussing how to make pork the protein of instead of cow. So it's not that they care about animals; they just don't want cows killed. Cow is the sacred animal that is related to Hinduism. It's only the cow. There's one other quote which I think is kind of funny. Apparently it's a Quartz article. The title of the Quartz article, in public, India is vegetarian. In private, it loves its chicken. And this guy is saying, what is this bullshit? It is no secret India is a majority beef-eating nation, okay? Again, there are myths that we love about India, and I can't get people to divest themselves of or disabuse themselves of that. And I finally want to finish up with this quote, again, from Arundhati Roy. And this is a great quote because she's basically saying it with reference to people, the marginalized people, but it applies to animals too. There's really no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard.
Really powerful quote. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was such an interesting presentation.
I can't believe that got to almost an hour.
Yeah. But it went by really fast. And that just makes me think, like, the last slide before this one.
Yeah.
I think it ties back to what you were saying at the beginning of, like, the white vegan movement wanting to include voices of color just to be cosmetically more diverse and say, like, but look, like, India's always been vegetarian, let alone the fact that vegetarian is not really like veganism, but whatever, like, hey, look, we're taking inspiration from non-white people.
Yes.
It seeks to make veganism inherently inclusive because supposedly all these people of color have been doing it for much longer than we have. So it's this lazy approach where like we don't really want to learn about it. So that's what we end up saying. And then that ends up making like us look really bad in countries like India who associate casteism and Hinduism with this very non-vegan idea of like oppressing certain people based on their class or
their caste. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with what you said. Yes.
That makes me just even so much more against the word, using the word ahimsa in the vegan movement constantly.
I mean, I tell people in India that this is what they're doing here. They think India is a place where it's all ahimsa and vegetarianism and peace and harmony, and they literally laugh. They laugh. Wow. We don't want the vegan movement to be the butt of jokes. No. I'm curious. You said something about how we shouldn't associate veganism with Buddhism as well. Can you quickly expand on that point? Sure. Buddhists are not vegetarian or vegan, they have pretty much the same view of animals as Jains do, in the sense that you sort of ascend up the chain of being, and a human being is the supreme. Okay, and karma, what makes you into a different kind of animal. Okay, so that is definitely there, but Buddhist scripture is very speciesist. It talks a lot about how you trap an animal like an elephant or a monkey. That's how you train an animal, and that's how you train your mind. And they're not, they're not vegetarian. So could you maybe ask me the question in a different way? Is it because you have the impression that they are vegetarian or vegan?
No, not necessarily. I just, when you were saying, we shouldn't associate with like Ahimsa or Hinduism or casteism and Buddhism just kind of, I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I guess, if Buddhism
Right.
was maybe inherently casteist or okay.
No. So one thing the Buddha was against was caste. Okay, definitely against caste, and he was also against ritual killing or excessive ritual killing. So definitely that's there, but that doesn't make them vegan or particularly animal rights even. Not at all. Yeah, it's in the right direction.
Right. Okay, I understand.
So, but to assume that, I mean, I know some people are shocked. I say, Buddhists are not vegan. No, can't be true. No, they're not.
Wait, so you mean we're going to have to research more people of color to include in our movement? I thought we could just do it Buddhism and Hinduism.
And I do, and there are people white vegans who are trying to make Buddhism vegan.
Interesting concept, yes.
Absolutely. Oh, they are. Oh, they absolutely are. Why don't you try to make Christianity vegan? I don't know.
Well, I feel like that's similar to what you were saying about, what's his name, Gary Francione trying to make Jains vegan. Or like explain to them why really, if they understand their philosophy, they should be vegan. That just seems very odd. Like, why don't you focus on your own people?
Odd is a very charitable way of putting it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or very oppressive.
Yeah. So, and same. Yeah, absolutely right. Jainism and Buddhism is in that boat right now. Yeah. And Jains are tiny. It's not a very big group at all, and neither are Buddhists. So
right.
So I mean, why would you focus? How does it help to make Jains vegan? Why would you put your effort there?
Yeah, and it's also like, why would it help to popularize the word ahimsa so much in the vegan movement?
It needs to be talked about, and more understanding, more discussion.
Absolutely.
And we're not really doing the vegan movement any favors by doing that, and not the global vegan movement, which is what we're aiming for right now. Because really, even if the USA starts to eat less meat, which fingers crossed they do, where's the meat going to go? It's going to get exported, right? And this is the 1.5 billion people in India and all the other people in China, and that's where it's all going to go. So it is a global movement. You have to consider all types of oppression, and I think casteism has been not been given its due. It really needs to come out in the open. Some people obviously they don't want to. They're managing impressions. They don't want to talk about it. But people who are Dalits, they want it. They want it included in the other discriminations like racism and sexism and LGBTQ issues. They want it to be on that list of things that are discriminated against. They want it to be drawn attention to in the international platforms.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Rama.
Well, thank you, Marin, for that opportunity.
I think people are going to really enjoy listening to this.
Thank you, Marin. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.